That's one of the classic cases.
Okay.
But there are a huge number, and actually there's a site which has done a fantastic job of collecting as many of these cases as possible. It's called reincarnationresearch.com, and it's got pages and pages of testimonials, and some of them are really, they're all interesting, but some of them are really compelling. And once you start looking at this, you think, well, there's something going on here, and something which we in the West we don't really sort of talk about much. It's only people that sort of get hooked onto it, and then once they're hooked, you can get a bit obsessed by it. And I must say, one has to be a bit careful. But a lot of this came to light by a certain Dr. Ian Stevenson. I don't know if you heard of him.
Yeah, I have.
At Virginia University. And he did a really, really in-depth study of children over a period of, I think 30 years. And his work was extremely meticulous and, for most people, extremely boring in as much as he was a scientist and he was reporting this and he was dotting the I's and crossing the T's, etc. And he did a lot of research in India, because in India, of course, reincarnation is part of the culture, and so parents are more open to it. So they could say, my little child used to live in the village down the road, and she knows the uncle and she's recognised the aunt and all this sort of thing. And he documented all that extremely meticulously, and wrote a book about it. But it only made a few sort of ripples in the academic community. But since then, there have been various other versions of it, which have made it a bit more palatable. And he's been succeeded by Dr. Jim Tucker, who is continuing this work at the Virginia University, and they really are coming up with some fascinating things. And this is where my project of the reincarnating penguins. This is where we are, at least I believe, we are stepping into completely new territory, because up to now we have only been getting cases reported of children who have memories of previous lives, which in 70% of the cases are lives which ended traumatically. Now, James Leininger, for example, he got shot down. He got shot down in the Second World War by the Japanese, and so when there are these vivid and traumatic transitions, they tend to get locked into memory, into children's memories, and can be quite disturbing, because between the ages of 2 and 7, this is what I call the golden years. These are the years during which children can access memories of their previous lives. So far, it's only been those who've had sort of something to complain about or have had a problem. And invariably, once that problem has been identified, the traumas tend to go away. But nobody, as I say, I will be willing to be corrected if somebody else can say so, but as far as I know, and I've done quite a bit of research on this, so far nobody has tried to look into children's past life memories, memories of children who are, shall we say, normal.
Yeah. Hey, Gordon, my producer, Kevin, wants to ask you a question here. Hey, Kevin, go ahead.
Hey, do you think it's possible for people to be born in future generations? Let's say you already lived on this planet and you already had a bunch of kids. Do you think it's possible that you could be born again in future generations of those like kids? Do you think that could be possible?
I think he.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that once you start looking at, for example, a sort of quantum physics, you if you can get your head around it, one realizes that time is something of an illusion. So past, present, and future, they're more or less happening together. It's just that we're on the shuttle, carrying us through all this. So I wouldn't rule out any kind of rebirth into other civilizations in the future, or even on other planets. I mean, why not? There are people who claim to have had past lives in other civilizations. So why not? I think one should not dismiss anything, and one shouldn't be too gullible either. But I think it is a vast area and an absolutely fascinating area, and which kind of puts us into perspective. I mean, it can be quite sort of mind-bending.
Exactly. And let's say if I had like 20 to 30 kids, not saying that I'm going to have 20 to 30 kids, who knows, sometime in the future, hey, here's Kevin again. And,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I think what he's saying is like he has some kids and they maybe have kids, and all of a sudden when they have kids, after he's passed, going down from a couple generations, he could be born again in the same family. I think. Is that what you were saying, Kevin?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, that's what he was saying.
Oh yeah, no, this definitely happens. And in particular, there are a number of well-documented cases of parents who had a child who was aborted or who died in infancy, and then they have another child a couple of 2 or 3 years later, and and the child would say, well, when I was, Mummy, I was in your tummy before, but something went wrong and I had to go, but I'm back here now. And there are loads of cases like that.
Oh wow, yeah. Gordon, I had a guest on here a couple weeks ago who is a ex-detective from the police department. He's retired, but he picked up doing professional he's a hypnotist. Not the type, you see in the theaters, but the actual, clinical type one. And he said that actually he has gone through, since his background was a detective, some of the cases where, he was interviewing people in their past lives and actually was able to trace what they said to be 100% accurate, which was, really interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No. It's certainly true, and there are a lot of therapists who do past life regression, and the results can be amazing. People who have had phobias of various sorts, if you go back to the original life and find out what happened and etc. Once you can identify the cause of such a phobia, it goes away. And in many cases, it's the cause of some chronic illnesses which doctors can't solve. But they go and do some past life regression therapy, and if they identify it, it really, there can be some almost miraculous cures.
Yeah.
And then there are a number of cases, and here again you'll find quite a few on that site I mentioned, of people who had wounds or problems with their wrist, with something, and it's left a birthmark on their body, which corresponds to the problem. And actually, a classic case is with Carol Bowman. Now, Carol Bowman has written 2 books about this subject, and the best known is Children's Past Lives. And in it, she explains the story of her son, who kept dreaming about the Civil War, and he had a mark. He had a sort of a I don't know what you could say. It was like he had a wound on his wrist. Well, it was a kind of a
like a birthmark or something like that.
It looked as if it was infected. It was red, and it could never heal, whatever they did. And anyway, one night they were out. I think it was the 4th of July, and I think he was about 4, and the fireworks went off. And he was terrified. I mean, he'd seen fireworks before, but he was absolutely terrified. And she calmed him down, and she without more or less realizing, but she sort of hypnotized him. And he started talking about the Civil War. And then he said that he'd been wounded, and that he was his hand was bandaged, and they sent him. They put a bandage around it, and then they sent him back into the front line, and he was killed. And this mark on his arm, on his wrist, corresponded to the wound he'd had. And once he had identified it and identified the source, that wound, which had been sitting there for the whole of his life until that point, in a couple of weeks, it was completely gone.
Oh, wow. How old was he when it disappeared? Do you know by any chance from what you read?
Sorry?
How old was he when the wound kind of disappeared?
Oh,
his age?
He was. I think he was about 7. It was in the golden years.
So,
and the thing is, why it is so precious, is that nobody. Why it is so precious is because we do have access to our previous lives at that time, and I posit that all children do have some memories of that time, or of their previous lives during those years between 2 and 7, but we never exploit them. We never see what's there. And for kids who are more or less normal, they say these weird things, and then you say, yes, dear, all right, we'll go back and carry on with your homework, or carry on with whatever you're doing. And they never follow it up. And yet many parents who discovered these stories of reincarnation and children's memories of it, regret later that they didn't explore it, because at this time you can find out all sorts of things about children, and it could be really useful to their development.
Well, sorry.
Of course, a case in point.
Sorry for cutting you off, but maybe for having or kids and adults having all these medical conditions that are unexplained, maybe that could be related to
past lives.
Yeah.
Maybe
past trauma, or something that they did in their past life that wasn't so great. Now they're being punished in this life,
I think, of course you're talking about karma. I think we shouldn't talk about punishment, This is another thing, the idea of sort of salvation. If you're a good boy, you go to heaven, and if you're a bad boy, you go to hell. But this is not, honestly, this is not how it works. We're not exactly punished, but if we do things which are, shall we say, bad, we have to learn that they're bad. And what you can have happening would be people in one life who were, say they were racist, and they sort of did horrible things to people of another race, etc. And so it would be perfectly in keeping for them to come back to be a person from that race that was being persecuted so that they could learn what it's like to be at the receiving end of it.
Oh, wow.